July 28, 1944, 2:47 p.m., 23,000 feet above Magdeburg, Germany. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler lines up his Messerschmitt Bf-109G-6 behind a crippled B-24 Liberator that's trailing smoke from two engines, its formation shattered, its defensive guns silent, flying straight and level like a wounded animal too exhausted to run. This should be the easiest kill of Stigler's career. His 22nd confirmed victory. Two more after this, and he gets the Knight's Cross, the medal that transforms good pilots into legends, that guarantees posting to cushy training commands away from combat. That means survival in a war where Luftwaffe life expectancy measures in weeks. The B-24 is helpless. Stigler can see the damage from 200 meters back. The entire tail section is shredded by flak. The ball turret hangs at an odd angle, clearly destroyed. The waist gun positions show no movement. This bomber is already dead, just taking a few more minutes to realize it. One burst from Stigler's 20mm cannon and 30mm cannons will finish it. 3 seconds of firing. Maybe 4. Then the bomber becomes a fireball, and Stigler becomes an ace with 22 kills. His thumb rests on the firing button. The gun sight shows perfect targeting solution. Range optimal. Deflection minimal. The bomber crew probably doesn't even know he's here. Their tail gunner is either dead or unconscious. Their formation is gone. They're alone over Germany flying a dying aircraft toward a destination they'll never reach. Stigler's training, his instincts, his muscle memory all scream to fire. This is what fighter pilots do. This is what he's done 21 times before. This is war. The Americans would kill him without hesitation if positions were reversed. There's no room for sentiment in aerial combat. But something makes him hesitate. Maybe it's the way the bomber is flying. Not evasively, not tactically, just straight and level like the crew has given up on defensive maneuvers and is focused entirely on keeping the aircraft in the air. Maybe it's the silence from the defensive guns, the absence of return fire that usually accompanies fighter attacks. Maybe it's the sheer amount of damage visible on the fuselage, the fact that this aircraft is still flying despite destruction that should have made it fall apart. Stigler closes to 150 meters. He can see into the waist gun positions now. He can see crewmen moving inside. One is on the floor, clearly wounded. Another is bent over him, applying first aid, not manning his gun because the gun is destroyed or because the wounded man needs immediate attention or both. The tail gunner is slumped in his position, either unconscious or dead. And suddenly Stigler understands what he's looking at. This isn't a bomber trying to attack German cities. This is a flying morgue carrying dead and wounded men who are desperately trying to reach England before their aircraft disintegrates. These aren't warriors anymore. They're victims of flak and fighters and bad luck, hanging on through sheer willpower, hoping to survive long enough to reach home. Stigler's thumb lifts slightly from the firing button. His instructor's words echo in memory. Gustav Rodel, his squadron commander in North Africa, the man who taught him to fly and fight, who drilled into every pilot under his command a code that separated soldiers from murderers. You are fighter pilots, not executioners. You fight military targets. You shoot down bombers attacking our cities. But you do not shoot men in parachutes. You do not strafe survivors. You do not kill the defenseless. If I ever see you cross that line, I will shoot you down myself. Stigler looks at the crippled B-24, at the wounded crew visible through the shattered fuselage, at the aircraft that's technically still military target, but realistically is already defeated, and makes a decision that will haunt him for 46 years until he finally finds the American crew and learns whether his mercy meant anything or if they crashed into the channel anyway. He pulls alongside the bomber instead of attacking it, positions his Bf-109 off the right wing where the pilot can see him clearly, makes eye contact with the American pilot through the shattered cockpit glass, raises his hand in a gesture that means, I'm not going to shoot you. I should, but I won't. Get out of German airspace. Go home. Live. This decision violates every order Stigler has received, contradicts his training, defies military logic, and could get him court-martialed and executed if superior officers discover it. But it's the decision he can live with. The decision that lets him look in mirrors. The decision that preserves something human in himself that 3 years of combat haven't quite destroyed. For the next 18 minutes, Franz Stigler will escort a dying American bomber toward the German coast, protecting it from his own side's flak batteries and other fighters, committing treason in service of conscience, risking everything for men he's never met and will likely never see again. This is the story of the day a Luftwaffe saw inside the wreckage of the bomber he was about to destroy and discovered that some things, like basic human decency, matter more than victory, more than medals, more than orders. The story of moral courage that looks like military failure. The story of the moment when one German pilot decided that killing helpless men wasn't war, it was murder, and he wouldn't participate regardless of consequences. The B-24 is flying straight and level. The American pilot has just noticed the German fighter off his wing and is waiting to die. Stigler is about to do something that makes no tactical sense, violates every regulation, and might cost him everything. But it's the right thing to do, and sometimes that's the only calculation that matters. His hand moves away from the firing button. He gestures to the American pilot. North, toward the coast, toward England, toward home. Get out of here before I change my mind or before another German fighter finds you. Go, now. The American pilot stares at him in disbelief. This German should be killing him. Instead, he's helping. The mathematics don't add up. War doesn't work this way. Enemies don't escort each other to safety. Yet here's a German fighter not attacking but protecting, not hunting but guiding, committing an act of mercy so unexpected it takes several seconds for the American crew to understand what's happening. Stigler maintains formation. He's committed now. Can't shoot them after making eye contact and gesturing. Can't abandon them to other German fighters after making this decision. Can't do this halfway. Either you kill them or you save them, and he's chosen saving. For 18 minutes, Franz Stigler flies as guardian angel to the enemy, protecting Americans from Germans, betraying his country in service of his conscience, making a choice he'll spend 46 years wondering about until a chance letter in a veterans magazine brings him face to face with the men he saved and finally answers the question that's haunted him since 1944. Did they make it home? Or did his mercy mean nothing because they crashed anyway? But that's decades in the future. Right now, at 2:47 p.m. on July 28, 1944, Oberleutnant Franz Stigler is making the most important decision of his life. The decision that will define who he is beyond rank and medals and confirmed kills. The decision that proves he's still human despite 3 years of killing. He doesn't fire. He escorts. And 10 American airmen will live to see tomorrow because one German pilot refused to murder the defenseless, regardless of what his orders said, regardless of what military doctrine demanded, regardless of what would have been easier and safer. 21 years old, trained to kill, ordered to destroy, choosing mercy instead, and wondering if he just threw away his career, his safety, possibly his life, for men who might die anyway in the next 30 minutes when their bomber finally gives up and falls into the channel. The escort begins. The most unlikely mission of World War II. A German fighter protecting an American bomber from German forces. A Luftwaffe pilot committing treason to save enemies. An act of mercy so unexpected that both sides will spend decades trying to understand why it happened. But Franz Stigler knows why. Because when you look inside the wreckage and see wounded men struggling to survive, when you make eye contact with enemy pilots who are waiting to die, when you're close enough to see that these are humans, not monsters, killing them becomes murder rather than combat. And Franz Stigler was raised to be a soldier, not a murderer. His thumb lifts from the firing button for good. His hand moves to the throttle, adjusting speed to match the crippled bomber. His decision is made. Whatever happens next, he won't be the one who kills these Americans. He'll protect them until they reach the coast. Then he'll break away and hope his superiors never learn what he did. The escort begins. The B-24 flies on, shattered but somehow still flying. The Bf-109 flies alongside, Hunter transformed into Guardian. And somewhere in the distance, the German coast approaches, marking the boundary between where Stigler can help and where the Americans are on their own. 18 minutes. That's how long the escort lasts. 18 minutes that will connect these men across decades. 18 minutes that prove humanity survives even in the worst wars. 18 minutes that demonstrate moral courage doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looks like refusing to do what everyone expects because your conscience won't allow it. The story begins here. the most unexpected escort mission of World War II. The German ace who saw inside the wreckage and couldn't pull the trigger. The American bomber crew that survived because one enemy refused to become a murderer. The moment when Franz Stigler's 22nd kill never happened because he chose mercy over orders. This is what happened on July 28, 1944, when one Luftwaffe pilot looked at a dying bomber and saw not a target, but 10 men desperately trying to survive, and decided that some victories aren't worth the cost of your humanity. 1939 to 1944, the making of a fighter pilot who refused to murder. Franz Stigler didn't start the war wanting to be merciful to enemies. He started wanting to fly, which in 1939 Germany meant joining the Luftwaffe and accepting that flying meant fighting. He was 17 when war began, too young for combat, but old enough for training. By 1940, he had his wings. By 1941, he was flying combat missions in North Africa. By 1942, he was an experienced pilot with multiple confirmed kills. By 1944, he was an ace, a veteran, a survivor in an air force where most pilots died within months of entering combat. But survival requires more than flying skill. It requires adapting to combat without losing yourself in the process. Stigler had the advantage of being trained by Gustav Rodel, a squadron commander who understood that pilots who become murderers don't last. They either get shot down through recklessness or they crack psychologically from doing things that haunt them. Rodel's code was simple and inflexible. You fight military targets. You shoot down bombers attacking German cities because stopping bombers is legitimate warfare. You engage enemy fighters because that's combat between armed opponents. But you never shoot parachuting pilots because they're defenseless and therefore not combatants. You never strafe survivors on the ground. You never kill the helpless. Cross that line, and you're not a warrior anymore. You're a murderer in a uniform. Stigler absorbed this code completely. Over hundreds of combat missions in North Africa, Sicily, and eventually Germany itself. He shot down 21 aircraft. Every kill was clean. Aircraft engaged in combat, defending themselves, capable of fighting back. He never shot parachuting pilots. Never strafed ground targets. Never crossed the lines Rodel had drawn. This wasn't because Stigler was soft. He was an effective fighter pilot. His 21 kills proved he knew how to fight, but he fought within boundaries that preserved his humanity. He killed when necessary, when the target was legitimate, when combat demanded it. But he never killed for convenience or sport or to run up his score. By July 1944, Stigler had seen too many pilots lose themselves, had watched men he trained with become callous, develop a taste for killing that went beyond military necessity, start shooting at anything that moved regardless of whether it was a legitimate target. Had seen what that transformation did to them. The 1,000-yard stares, the inability to feel normal emotions, the gradual loss of everything that made them human beyond their ability to kill. Stigler didn't want to become that. Wanted to survive the war with his soul intact. Wanted to be able to look in mirrors afterward and recognize himself. This meant maintaining boundaries. Maintaining the code Rodel had taught. Refusing to cross lines even when crossing them was easier or safer or more tactically sound. On July 28, 1944, maintaining those boundaries meant not shooting a defenseless bomber regardless of what his orders said, what doctrine demanded, what tactical sense suggested. It meant looking at wounded men and seeing humans who deserved mercy rather than targets that deserved destruction. The bomber Stigler intercepted that afternoon was part of a formation that had bombed an industrial target near Magdeburg. The raid had been catastrophic for the Americans. Heavy flak, aggressive fighter attacks, formations shattered. Dozens of bombers went down. This particular B-24 had been hit hard during the bomb run, lost 2 engines, had the tail section shredded, most defensive guns knocked out, multiple crew members wounded. The pilot, 2nd Lieutenant Charlie Brown, was fighting desperately to keep the aircraft flying long enough to reach England. Every minute the bomber stayed in the air was a minute closer to safety, a minute more that his crew might survive. But they were still 200 miles from the coast, flying over hostile territory, alone and defenseless. When Stigler intercepted them, Brown expected to die. His remaining gunners couldn't defend effectively against a fighter attack. His aircraft couldn't maneuver. He was helpless. This German fighter closing on his tail would shoot him down, and 10 Americans would die in the wreckage. But Stigler pulled alongside instead of attacking. and Brown's world stopped making sense. German fighters don't protect American bombers. Enemies don't help each other. War doesn't work this way. Yet here was a German off his wing, clearly visible, making gestures that suggested protection rather than attack. Stigler pointed north, toward the coast, towards safety. His meaning was clear: fly that direction. I'll cover you. Get out of German airspace. Brown didn't understand why, but understood what. This German was giving him a chance, helping rather than killing, committing some act of mercy that Brown couldn't comprehend but had to accept because it was the only thing keeping his crew alive. For the next 18 minutes, Stigler flew escort, positioned his Bf-109 between the bomber and potential threats. When German flak batteries prepared to fire at the crippled bomber, Stigler maneuvered between them, wagging his wings in the signal for friendly aircraft, hold fire. The flak crews, confused by a German fighter protecting an American bomber, held fire rather than risk shooting down their own pilot. When another German fighter appeared in the distance, possibly moving to intercept, Stigler positioned himself aggressively between the fighter and the bomber, sending the message that this bomber was his. He'd claimed the kill. Other fighters should find their own targets. The other fighter, perhaps assuming Stigler was shepherding the bomber to a crash site or had damaged it and was ensuring it went down, turned away. Brown watched this protection with growing disbelief. This German wasn't just not attacking. He was actively defending them from other Germans, committing treason, risking his own career, possibly his life, to help enemies escape. After 18 minutes of escort, they reached the German coast. The channel stretched ahead. Beyond that, England. Safety. Home. Survival. Stigler pulled close one final time, made eye contact with Brown through the shattered cockpit glass, raised his hand in a salute. Not the Nazi salute, but the traditional military salute of one warrior acknowledging another. A gesture of respect, of farewell, of good luck. Then he broke away, rolled his Bf-109 inverted, and dove back toward Germany, leaving the crippled bomber to continue alone across the channel. Brown watched him go, unable to process what had happened. His crew was alive because a German fighter pilot refused to kill them. The mathematics of war said they should be dead. Moral mathematics said they deserved to live. The German had chosen moral mathematics over military logic. The B-24 limped across the channel, losing altitude gradually, engines failing one by one. Brown nursed it to the English coast, found an emergency airfield, made a landing that destroyed what remained of the aircraft but saved the crew. All 10 men survived. All 10 walked away from wreckage that should have been their tomb. They survived because Franz Stigler looked inside the wreckage and couldn't pull the trigger. Because one German pilot drew a line between war and murder and refused to cross it. Because moral courage sometimes means not doing what everyone expects. Stigler returned to his base, landed, and filed a routine patrol report that mentioned engaging enemy aircraft, but made no mention of escorting a bomber or refusing to shoot. He couldn't mention it. Admitting he protected an enemy bomber meant court-martial and execution. His mercy had to remain secret or it would kill him. For 46 years, Stigler kept that secret. Never told anyone what he'd done. Never sought recognition for mercy shown to enemies. Never tried to find out if the bomber crew survived or if his gesture meant nothing because they crashed anyway. For 46 years, Charlie Brown wondered about the German pilot who saved his crew. Wondered why. Wondered who. Wondered if he could ever find the man and say thank you for giving them their lives back. In 1990, 46 years after that July afternoon, Brown placed an ad in a combat veterans magazine describing the encounter and asking if the German pilot might be alive and willing to make contact. He provided details, date, location, description of the bomber's damage, the escort to the coast, the final salute. In Vancouver, Canada, Franz Stigler read that ad and knew immediately it was about him. Every detail matched. The date, the location, the damaged bomber, the escort, the salute. After 46 years, he finally learned what happened to the bomber crew. They survived. His mercy hadn't been wasted. The men he saved lived through the war, went home, married, had children. 10 lives saved created dozens more lives through their descendants. Stigler wrote back, "That was me. I was the pilot. I couldn't shoot you. You were helpless. Shooting you would have been murder." They arranged to meet. In a hotel in Vancouver, 2 old men who had been enemies met as friends. Brown wanted to say thank you. Stigler wanted to know if his mercy had mattered. Both got their answers. Why did you do it? Brown asked. You could have shot us down easily. You could have killed us all. Why didn't you? Stigler's answer was simple. I looked inside your bomber. I saw your wounded crew. I saw you were helpless. My instructor taught me that we are fighter pilots, not murderers. Shooting helpless men isn't war, it's murder. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. You risked everything for us. If your commanders found out, they would have executed me, Stigler confirmed. I knew that, but I also knew I could live with being executed for showing mercy. I couldn't live with murdering helpless men. The choice was clear. They became close friends for the remaining years of their lives. Attended air shows together. Gave interviews together. Told their story to anyone who would listen. Two old warriors who met as enemies and became brothers through an act of mercy that transcended war. Brown died in 2008. Stigler died 8 months later. Before his death, Stigler told interviewers, Charlie became my brother that day. Not when we met in 1990, but on July 28, 1944. I saw him struggling to save his crew, and I knew I couldn't kill him. Some rules matter more than orders. Some laws are higher than military discipline. Humanity is one of those laws. The story of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown isn't primarily about World War II tactics or aviation history. It's about moral courage, the courage to refuse orders when orders demand inhumanity, the courage to show mercy when mercy puts you at risk, the courage to draw lines and refuse to cross them even when crossing would be easier, safer, more tactically sound. Stigler's decision on July 28, 1944, demonstrates that individual conscience can triumph even in circumstances designed to destroy conscience. That soldiers can fight without becoming murderers. That enemies can recognize shared humanity even across battle lines. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to do what everyone expects because your moral compass points a different direction. Military historians debate whether Stigler made the tactically correct decision. He violated orders. He failed to destroy a legitimate military target. He compromised operational security by revealing his presence to enemy aircraft. By strict military standards, he failed his duty. But by human standards, he succeeded completely. He preserved his humanity in circumstances designed to destroy it. He showed mercy when mercy was dangerous. He refused to become a murderer even when becoming a murderer was expected, encouraged, and rewarded with medals. Stigler finished the war with 21 confirmed kills, 2 short of the Knight's Cross that would have guaranteed his survival. Those missing 2 kills, the kills he could have gotten by shooting down Brown's bomber, might have saved his life. He survived anyway through luck and skill, but he survived as himself, as a man who could look in mirrors and recognize who he was. After the war, Stigler emigrated to Canada, built a new life, married, raised a family, worked as a businessman, rarely discussed the war, never mentioned July 28, 1944, because admitting he'd protected an enemy bomber would have raised questions he didn't want to answer about why, about what that said about his loyalty to Germany, about whether protecting enemies made him a traitor. Only after Brown's letter in 1990 did Stigler finally discuss that day, finally acknowledge what he'd done, finally learn that his mercy had saved 10 lives that produced dozens of descendants. Only then did he discover that refusing to murder the helpless wasn't weakness or failure. It was the most important thing he'd ever done. The lesson of Franz Stigler isn't that war is good or that enemies should be friends. The lesson is that even in the worst wars, individual humans can choose to be decent. That orders don't absolve conscience. That there are lines that shouldn't be crossed even when crossing them is expected. That refusing to murder the defenseless is always right, regardless of uniform, nationality, or tactical situation. Stigler looked inside the wreckage of a bomber he was about to destroy and saw humans who deserved to live. He made a choice that could have killed him, but saved them. That choice connected them across decades and proved that humanity survives even when everything else fails. 10 Americans lived because one German refused to become a murderer. They lived full lives, raised families, created futures that wouldn't exist if Stigler had fired that day. Their descendants, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, number in the dozens now, all existing because Franz Stigler's thumb lifted from the firing button and he chose mercy over victory. That's not a tactical decision. That's not a military calculation. That's a human being deciding that some things matter more than winning. That conscience transcends orders, that preserving your humanity is worth risking your life. Franz Stigler made that decision at 23,000 feet above Germany on a July afternoon in 1944. He made it alone, without guidance, without knowing whether it would matter or if the bomber would crash anyway. He made it because when you look inside the wreckage and see wounded men struggling to survive, killing them becomes unacceptable regardless of what your orders say. That's the story of the Luftwaffe ace who shot down a B-24, saw inside the wreckage, and refused to fight again. Not because he lost courage, but because he found something more important than courage. He found conscience, and conscience demanded mercy.